Greetings, we are going to read the Steele Dossier, the secret document, the top secret document. Confidential sensitive source, Company Intelligence Report 2016-80, U.S. presidential election, Republican candidate Donald Trump's activities in Russia and compromising relationship with the Kremlin. Summary. Russian regime has been cultivating, supporting and assisting Trump for at least 5 years. Aim, endorsed by Putin, has been to encourage splits and divisions in the Western alliance. So far, Trump has declined various sweetener real estate business deals offered him in Russia in order to further the Kremlin cultivation of him. However, he and his inner circle have accepted a regular flow of intelligence from the Kremlin, including on his Democratic and other political rivals. Former top Russian intelligence officer claims FSB has compromised Trump through his activities in Moscow sufficiently to be able to blackmail him. According to several knowledgeable sources, his conduct in Moscow has included perverted sexual acts which have been arranged and monitored by the FSB. A dossier of compromising material on Hillary Clinton has been collated by the Russian intelligence services over many years and mainly comprises bugged conversations she had on various visits to Russia and intercepted phone calls rather than any embarrassing conduct. The dossier is controlled by Kremlin spokesman Peskov directly on Putin's orders. However, it has not yet been distributed abroad, including to Trump. Russian intentions for its deployment still unclear. Detail 1. Speaking to a trusted compatriot in June 2016, sources A and B, a senior Russian foreign ministry figure and a former top-level Russian intelligence officer, still active inside the Kremlin respectively, the Russian authorities have been cultivating and supporting U.S. Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump for at least 5 years. Source B asserted that the Trump operation was both supported and directed by Russian President Vladimir Putin. Its aim was to sow discord and disunity both within the U.S. itself, but more especially within the transatlantic alliance, which was viewed as inimical to Russia's interests. Source C, a senior Russian financial official, said the Trump operation should be seen in terms of Putin's desire to return to 19th century great power politics anchored upon countries' interests rather than the ideals-based international order established after World War II. She has overheard Putin talking in this way to close associates on several occasions. 2. In terms of specifics, Source A confided that the Kremlin had been feeding Trump and his team valuable intelligence on his opponents, including Democratic presidential candidate Hillary Clinton, for several years. See more below. This was confirmed by Source D, a close associate of Trump who had organized and managed his recent trips to Moscow and who reported also in June 2016 that this Russian intelligence had been very helpful. The Kremlin's cultivation operation on Trump also had comprised offering him various lucrative real estate development business deals in Russia, especially in relation to the ongoing 2018 World Cup soccer tournament. However, so far, for reasons unknown, Trump had not taken up any of these. 3. However, there were other aspects to Trump's engagement with the Russian authorities. One which had borne fruit for them was to exploit Trump's personal obsessions and sexual perversion in order to obtain suitable compromising material on him. According to source D, where he had been present, Trump's perverted conduct in Moscow included hiring the presidential suite of the Ritz-Carlton Hotel, where he knew President and Mrs. Obama, whom he hated, had stayed on one of their official trips to Russia, and defiling the bed where they had slept by employing a number of prostitutes to perform a golden showers urination show in front of him. The hotel was known to be under FSB control, with microphones and concealed cameras in all the main rooms to record anything they wanted to. The Moscow Ritz-Carlton episode involving Trump reported above was confirmed by source E, now we have a blackout, who said that he and several of the staff were aware of it at the time and subsequently. He believed it had happened in 2013. Source E provided an introduction for a company ethnic Russian operative to Source F, a female staffer at the hotel when Trump had stayed there, who also confirmed the story. Speaking separately in June 2016, Source B, the former top-level Russian intelligence officer, asserted that Trump's unorthodox behavior in Russia over the years had provided the authorities there with enough embarrassing material on the now Republican presidential candidate to be able to blackmail him if they so wished. 5 asked about the Kremlin's reported intelligence feed to Trump over recent years and rumors that a Russian dossier of compromise on Hillary Clinton being circulated. Source B confirmed the file's existence. He confided in a trusted compatriot that it had been collated by Department K of the FSB for many years, dating back to her husband Bill's presidency, and comprised mainly eavesdropped conversations of various sorts rather than detailed evidence of unorthodox or embarrassing behavior. Some of the conversations were from bugged comments Clinton had made on her various trips to Russia and focused on things she had said which contradicted her current position on various issues. Others were most probably from phone intercepts. 6. Continuing on this theme, Source G, a serious Kremlin official, confided that the Clinton dossier was controlled exclusively by Chief Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov, who was responsible for compiling, handling it on the explicit instructions of Putin himself. The dossier, however, had not as yet been available abroad, including to Trump or his campaign team. At present, it was unclear what Putin's intentions were in this regard. 20th June 2016. Company Intelligence Report 2016, Russia Cybercrime, a synopsis of Russian state-sponsored and other cyber-offensive criminal operations. Summary. Russia has extensive program of state-sponsored offensive cyber operations. External targets include foreign governments and big corporations, especially banks. FSB leads on cyber within Russian apparatus. Limited success in attacking top foreign targets like G7 governments, security services and FIS, but much more on second-tier ones through IT backdoors using corporate and other visitors to Russia. FSB often uses coercion and blackmail to recruit most capable cyber operatives in Russia into its state-sponsored programs. Heavy use also, both wittingly and unwittingly, of CIS emigres working in Western corporations and ethnic Russians employed by neighboring governments. Example, Latvia. Example cited of successful Russian cyber operation targeting Syria's senior Western business visitor provided backdoor into important Western institutions. Example given of U.S. citizen of Russian origin approached by FSB and offered incentive of investment in his business when visiting Moscow. Problems, however, for Russian authorities themselves encountering local hackers and cybercriminals operating outside state control. Central Bank claims there were over 20 serious attacks on correspondent accounts held by CBR in 2015, comprising rubles several billion in fraud. Some details of given of leading non-state Russian cybercriminal groups details. 1. Speaking in June 2016, a number of Russian figures with a detailed knowledge of national cybercrime, both state-sponsored and otherwise, outlined the current situation in this area. A former senior intelligence officer divided Russian state-sponsored offensive cyber operations into four categories in order of priority: targeting foreign, especially Western governments, penetrating leading foreign business corporations, especially banks, domestic monitoring of the elite, and attacking political opponents both at home and abroad. The former intelligence officer reported that the Federal Security Service FSB was the lead organization within the Russian state apparatus for cyber operations. 2. In terms of the success of Russian offensive cyber operations to date, a senior government figure reported that there had been only limited success in penetrating the first-tier foreign targets. These comprise Western, especially G7 and NATO governments, security and intelligence services and central banks, and the EIFIs. To compensate for this shortfall, massive effort had been invested, with much greater success in attacking the secondary targets, particularly Western private banks and the governments of smaller states allied to the West. He mentioned Latvia in this regard. Hundreds of agents, either consciously cooperating with the FSB or whose personal and professional IT systems had been unwittingly compromised, were recruited. Many were people who had ethnic and family ties to Russia and or had been incentivized financially to cooperate. Such people often would receive monetary inducements or contractual favors from the Russian state or its agents in return. This had created difficulties for parts of the Russian state apparatus in indulging them. Example, the Central Bank of Russia knowingly having to cover up for such agents' money laundering operations through the Russian financial system. 3. In terms of the FSB's recruitment of capable cyber operatives to carry out its ideally deniable offensive cyber operations, a Russian IT specialist with direct knowledge reported in June 2016 that this was done often using coercion and blackmail. In terms of foreign assets, the FSB was approaching US citizens of Jewish Russian origin on business trips to Russia. In one case, a US citizen of Russian ethnicity had been visiting Moscow to attract investors in his new information technology program. The FSB clearly knew this and had offered to provide seed capital to this person in return for them being able to access and modify his IP, with a view of targeting priority foreign targets by planting a Trojan virus in the software. The US visitor was told this was common practice. The FSB also had implied significant operational successes as a result of installing cheap Russian IT games containing their own malware unwittingly by targets on their PCs and other platforms. 4. In a more advanced and successful FSB operation, an IT operator inside a leading Russian SOE, who previously had been employed on conventional defensive IT work there, had been under instruction for the last year to conduct an offensive cyber operation against a foreign director of the company. Although the latter was apparently an infrequent visitor to Russia, the FSB now successfully had penetrated his personal IT and through this had managed to access various important institutions in the West through the back door. 5. In terms of other technical IT platforms, an FSB cyber operative flagged up the Telegram and ciphered commercial system as having been of a special concern and therefore heavily targeted by the FSB, not least because it was used frequently by Russian internal political activists and oppositionists. His understanding was that the FSB now successfully had cracked this communications software, and therefore it was no longer secure to use. The senior Russian government figure cited above also reported that non-state-sponsored cybercrime was becoming an increasing problem inside Russia for the government and authorities there. The Central Bank of Russia claimed that in 2015 alone there had been more than 20 attempts at serious cyber embezzlement of money from corresponding accounts held there, comprising several billions rubles. More generally, he understood that there were circa 15 major organized crime groups in the country involved in cybercrime, all of which continue to operate largely outside state and FSB control. These included the so-called Anunek, Bucktrap, and Metal organizations. 26 July 2015. Confidential Intelligence Report 2016-95 Russia-US Presidential Election Further indications of extensive conspiracy between Trump's campaign team and the Kremlin. Further evidence of extensive conspiracy between Trump's campaign team and Kremlin, sanctioned at highest levels and involving Russian diplomatic staff based in the US. Trump associate admits Kremlin behind recent appearance of DNC emails on WikiLeaks as means of maintaining plausible deniability. Agreed exchange of information established in both directions. Trump's team using mails within DNC and hackers in the US as well as outside in Russia. Putin motivated by fear and hatred of Hillary Clinton. Russians receiving intel from Trump's team on Russian oligarchs and their families in US. They are receiving intel from Trump. Mechanism for transmitting this intelligence involves pension disbursements to Russian emigres living in US as cover using consular officials in New York, DC, and Miami. Suggestion from source close to Trump and Manafort that Republican campaign team happy to have Russia as media boogeyman to mask more extensive corrupt business ties to China and other emerging countries. Oh my God. Detail 1. Speaking in confidence to a compatriot in late July 2016, Source E, an ethnic Russian close associate of Republican US presidential candidate Donald Trump, admitted that there was a well-developed conspiracy of cooperation between them and the Russian leadership. Now, ethnic Russian close associate of Trump. They said ethnic Russian Jewish because all these Jews are Russians. This was managed on the Trump side by the Republican candidate's campaign manager Paul Manafort, who was using foreign policy advisor Carter Page and others as intermediaries. The two sides had a mutual interest in defeating Democratic presidential candidate Hillary Clinton, whom President Putin apparently both hated and feared. Inter alia, Source E acknowledged that the Russian regime had been behind the recent leak of embarrassing email messages emanating from the Democratic National Committee to the WikiLeaks platform. The reason for using WikiLeaks was plausible deniability, and the operation had been conducted with the full knowledge and support of Trump and senior members of his campaign team. In return, the Trump team had agreed to sideline a Russian intervention in Ukraine as a campaign issue and to raise US NATO defense commitments in the Baltics and Eastern Europe to deflect attention away from Ukraine, a priority for Putin, who needed to cauterize the subject. In the wider context of Trump campaign-Kremlin cooperation, Source E claimed that the intelligence network being used against Clinton comprised three elements. Firstly, there were agents, facilitators within the Democratic Party structure itself. Secondly, Russian emigre and associated offensive cyber operations based in the US. And thirdly, state-sponsored cyber operatives working in Russia. All three elements had played an important role to date. On the mechanism for rewarding relevant assets based in the US and affecting a two-way flow of intelligence and other useful information. Source E claimed that Russian diplomatic staff in key cities such as New York, Washington, and Miami were using the emigre pension distribution system as cover. The operation therefore depended on key people in the U.S. Russian Jewish emigre community for its success. Tens of thousands of dollars were involved.